So let's begin. I don't have a bell, no power. So I'm ready to start when y'all are. And I'm glad that, sort of as Kevin suggested, that you're starting to connect with each other. It's an important piece of this. So I have some things to share, and I have a handout for us to kind of go over and discuss. But really, I think of this session not so much as I'm going to really teach you something, but that I want to start a conversation with you. And I'm very interested in your feedback, sort of as Kevin said, like we didn't invite you here to give you something, we actually invited you here to get something from you. At some level, your participation. So what I've done here, and I'm about to hand it out, but I didn't want you to kind of get distracted with the handout or get ahead of me in it. I'll hand it out in a moment. Is with a feeling and intention, a feeling that the 12-step model, which is so heavily theistic, Christian, Judaic Christian, God of Abraham, creator, as long as it's male, however, whatever kind of male creator you want it to be, it's cool. So with a feeling that, for recovery, so many people that have such difficulty with that Judeo-Christian model. And so I've been thinking about and looking at, well, what is the Buddhist model? What would be the Buddhist model? And not what so many people have done, including Kevin and many others, which is, let's take a Buddhist perspective on the Christian-oriented 12-step process. And so I've been very interested in saying, what if we just remove that? What if we just look at what would a Buddhist approach be, rather than a Buddhist approach to a theistic approach? A non-theistic, Buddhist-inspired process of recovery. Now, of course, I'm over 21 years in 12-step recovery, so I'm heavily influenced by the Judeo-Christian process of the steps. Now, I think maybe some people don't even agree that the steps are Judeo-Christian, but different perspectives. My feeling is that the 12 steps are wonderfully open-minded theism. Really open-minded, God-based, theistically based, but incredibly as open-minded and inclusive as possible, as long as you believe in God. On some level or another, and your own understanding and all of that stuff. I think it's wonderful, actually, on some level. I feel like if you're not desperate enough to even believe in God, you may not have hit a bottom yet. If you still have the sort of intellectual luxury of saying, like, well, I'm strung out, or I'm an alcoholic, or I'm, powerless in one way or another over substances or food or sex or money. But it's not bad enough to believe in God. It's bad. But it's not bad enough to adopt a philosophy that doesn't ring true. So I have some questions about that. of level of desperation. But that having been said, I have basically looked at the core teachings of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, and looked at how this is the Buddha's prescription to end suffering, all forms of suffering. So I think it makes a lot of sense that it's also a prescription to end the suffering of addiction. Not just other forms of suffering, but really the experience of addiction and the path to ending it through adopting and I've taken some liberties with the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths and changed the wording and applied it to addiction. And so that's what I have here for you. And let's take a look at it together. This sort of cover letter says, my disclaimer. The Four Truths of Recovery is a work in process. This is not a final draft or a tested practice. These are just some of my preliminary thoughts on how to offer a Buddhist-oriented path to recovery from addictions. I welcome your feedback and critical observations. My plan is to continue to work on this, and with the participation of those who are interested, begin to test the path with addicts who are willing to commit to the Buddhist path of recovery. So maybe an interesting way to do this together is, why don't we read through it once as a group, and then we can get into some of the specifics and discuss some of the specifics. Maybe we could actually go around and you guys could read it. Whoever would like to begin, and then kind of just maybe each reading, you know, a kind of sentence or a paragraph, and then letting the next person. Who would like to begin? Alex, please.
1. Addiction is suffering. Understand, acknowledge, admit, and accept all the ways drugs, alcohol, etc. have caused suffering in our lives.
Action. Write an in-depth and detailed inventory of the suffering you have experienced in association with your addictions.
The cause of addiction is craving.
Understand that all forms of addiction have roots in the natural human tendency to crave for life, to be more pleasurable and less painful than it actually is. The substances we have craved and become addicted to must be abandoned and renounced.
Action. Investigate, analyze, and share the inventory with your mentor teacher and come to understand the cause of your addiction suffering.
3. Recovery is possible. Freedom from the suffering caused by addiction is attainable if we are ready and willing to follow the Eightfold Path.
Action. Study the Buddhist teachings on enlightenment. Come to a verified faith in the path of recovery, awakening through the actions taken on the path.
The Eightfold Path to Recovery.
The 8 factors or folds of the path are to be developed, experienced, and penetrated. This is a path of action, not blind faith. Recovery will only come from taking the right actions.
1. Understanding. It is crucial to have at least an intellectual understanding of the factors in one's life that leads to addiction.
We must understand and accept that pain is unavoidable, but also impermanent. On the path to recovery, we must learn to tolerate pain and move towards meeting all pleasant experiences with compassion. Likewise, with pleasure, we must understand that happiness is not the presence of pleasure, it is the absence of suffering. Pleasure is also impermanent, and the cravings, chasing and clinging to substances that create temporary pleasure and temporary relief pain got us into this mess in the first place.
Understand that it's time to renounce recreational drugs, etc. in all forms, regardless of specific substances we become addicted to. Alcoholics can't smoke crack or weed, and crackheads can't drink booze.
Understand that forgiveness is a necessary part of the recovery process.
Understand the importance of service and generosity.
Understanding the necessity of non-harming, harmful actions often lead to relapse.
2, intention and understanding what is true and important is not enough. It must be followed up with intentional actions.
Come on, jump in the back.
The intention to abstain from all substances that could lead to suffering.
The intention to meet all pain with compassion and all pleasure with non-attached appreciation.
The intention to forgive and ask for forgiveness toward all people we have harmed or been harmed by, including ourselves.
The intention to be generous and kind to all living beings.
The intention to be honest and live with integrity.
The intention to practice non-harming.
3, communication community. Being honest, wise, and careful with our communications.
Asking for help from the community.
Getting mentors to guide us through the process.
Being involved in community is a place to practice wise communication and to support others on the path.
Practicing openness, honesty, and humility about the difficulties and the successes we experience.
Action engagement, abstaining from all substances that can lead to suffering.
Trying to meet all pain with compassion and all pleasure with non-attached appreciation.
Being wise and careful with affectuality.
Seeking to forgive and ask for forgiveness for all people we have harmed or been harmed by, including ourselves, through both meditative training and direct amends.
Practicing generosity and kindness toward all living beings.
Practicing honesty and attempting to live with integrity.
Developing a non-harming approach to life.
Dedicating our life's energy to service.
5, livelihood service, moving towards securing a livelihood that causes no harm.
Using our time and energy to help create positive change.
Path of energy, daily commitment, discipline, meditation, and wise actions.
Strive for moment-to-moment mindfulness of feelings, emotions, thoughts, and sensations.
Responding with compassion when experience is unpleasant.
Responding with non-attached appreciation when experience is pleasant.
Kindness, forgiveness, and generosity all take effort.
Skillful means applying the appropriate meditation or action to a given circumstance.
7, mindfulness meditations. Developing wisdom through practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness.
Seeing clearly and healing the root causes and conditions that lead to the suffering of addiction.
Practicing present time awareness in all aspects of our life.
Concentration meditations, developing the capacity to focus the mind on a single subject, such as the breath or a phrase.
Utilizing concentration at times of temptation or craving in order to abstain from acting unwisely.
Training the mind through the practices of loving kindness, compassion, and forgiveness to focus on the positive qualities we seek to encounter others.